To order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, October 12th, 2023. All managers are present except Manager Loftus, and there are no members of the public here, so we'll move to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Manager Olson moves. Is there a second? Manager Hejmati seconds. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda, we have approval of the September 28th board meeting minutes, and that is all. Is there a motion to approve?
Approve.
Manager Sando
Yep.
moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Miller seconds. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Some of my notes are maybe a little out of date because I wasn't here last time, but the Minneapolis liaisons met, Manager Hejmati and Miller and I, we brought up to date on the 22nd of September, and we're looking for a date that the steering committee can get together. So I'm going to backtrack. No, I won't. What I'd like to do, because we can only have 2 managers on the steering committee, is to appoint Managers Hejmati and Miller to be on the steering committee, and myself as an alternate, but then the 3 of us could still remain liaisons. If that's agreeable, could there be a motion to approve that appointment?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Olson seconds. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the last item I wanted to mention is that the annual meeting is coming up for Minnesota Watersheds, and if you want to go, the sooner you let Ms. Johnson know, the better, because the best hotel rooms will fill up, and you'll be at Holiday Inn across town if you're not careful. But do let Deb know that. That is my report. Manager Olson, you chaired Operations and Programs Committee this evening. Would you report?
Yes. This afternoon we discussed a draft work plan for the near-term diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that we're putting together for the watershed. And we did a very detailed breakdown of the DEI work that our team has put together. And everybody had a chance to talk and make comments, and we're making good progress for a November plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other meetings or events? The upcoming meetings are listed in our agenda. On October 17th, next Tuesday, Metro Watersheds will be meeting, and Manager Maxwell is a liaison. That will be an in-person meeting. And then the Citizens Advisory Committee meets November 15th. Manager Hejmati is the liaison there, and our committee and board meetings for the next 2 rounds are set out there as well. Let's go to item 11.1, Resolution 23061. Ms. Cermak presenting.
Right. Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Here tonight seeking action on Resolution 23061. This resolution is twofold. I'm asking the board to accept our pilot model's project summary report, which would close out our pilot model kind of scope of work with Kinley Horn, and also asking the board to agree with our findings and selection of ICPR as our upcoming model platform for the climate model bill. We did go through a pretty extensive overview at last month's committee meeting about kind of the scope of the pilot model project, the report, and the findings of that work. But I do want to take some time tonight to go through a fairly thorough presentation again, just to memorialize the work and how it's shaped our upcoming climate model build. I'll start off by just positioning where the 2D climate model sits within our climate action framework, walk through why we need this additional watershed scale modeling tool, and then we'll get into the pilot model build itself and kind of the outcomes and the learnings from that work, and wrap up with some near-term work that we have ahead of us. So as we know, Minnesota is getting warmer, and it's also getting wetter on average. We are getting more rain, and that comes with kind of added challenges for water managers and implications for kind of managing volumes and water levels across the watershed. In the last decade alone, we've kind of seen both sides of the extremes, with the 2014 flood of record, followed by kind of consecutive record-breaking wet years, and we are now hopefully crawling out of kind of a back-to-back years of drought. And as the district looked to identify what our role should be with climate change, not much of a surprise that flooding really emerged as a significant area that the organization was well suited to address. And we've carried this role with flood adaptation into our climate action framework. Our framework here is kind of has set out 3 pillars, which is really a pathway that we plan to follow to get us towards measurable adaptation on the landscape. Before we can really start working and discussing creative solutions with our partners, we really have to take a moment to first characterize how climate change has been impacting both our natural and our built systems today, and also look into the future under kind of a range of projected climate on how those stressors and flood risk might change ahead of us. One of the key tools we've identified needing in order to give us that level of understanding is the development of an additional watershed scale modeling tool, where we want to be able to characterize how water is moving across our landscape, where those issues are occurring, how often, the magnitude of those issues, but also give us the ability to look 30, 50 years ahead. How are those issues going to change? And give us the ability to toggle management levers and really quantify how various policies and or project strategies can get us towards a resilient watershed. We pursued LCCMR funding for this work, and as of July 1st this year, we have secured $738,000 to build the model. And as you may recall, it has been a little bit of a journey to secure that funding, but we have really capitalized on that extra time and taken advantage of that time. We used the last year and a half to really dig into where we had some areas of uncertainty, maybe some areas of anxiety with the project, and spent our time really thinking about how are we going to make sure that we get out the other side of this model build with an accurate model, an effective build that gives us the answers to the questions that we really want to ask. And we also really foresaw this challenge of how we were going to incorporate the numerous spatial data sets that we need to build into this model. Specifically, this challenge of incorporating the numerous municipal stormwater data sets that exist within the watershed, all of which are stored in kind of their own unique structure. And so we pursued our pilot model to really focus in and learn about these 2 areas of risk. Before we started the pilot, we did kind of go out and do a initial model screening to identify possible platforms that would serve us well for climate. And really the goal here was to be able to build out a digital representation of our physical system. And so we've kept a few criteria really high when we did our initial screening. First, we wanted to make sure that the model had the ability to incorporate a detailed one-dimensional pipe network. We know that localized flooding, a lot of that is driven by pipe capacity issues and drainage issues. We also want to make sure that the model can handle a 2D surface representation. We want to see how the water is flowing across the system and how it's taking advantage of any depressional storage that exists with our wetlands, our ponds. And lastly, we really wanted to find a model that has a 2D groundwater component, a realistic way of tracking the water table over time. We've seen firsthand with the Nokomis groundwater study how kind of rising and elevated groundwater levels can really exacerbate surface flooding issues. So through that work, ICPR and ICM kind of emerged as kind of the top 2 picks, and we brought those into our pilot model project. 2 key objectives were kind of kept in focus as we designed the scope. We first really wanted to take the time to establish this overarching automated framework that would help us bring in all these spatial data sets into the model. And along the way, take note of any data gaps that we're observing so we can kind of get those collected ahead of the build. We also took advantage of this pilot model time to really understand the nuances between ICPR and ICM, their strengths, their weaknesses, what are they truly capable of, to identify which model would best serve us for our upcoming climate needs, and also how to effectively approach that build. We partnered with the city of Edina, formally through an MOU. It was really great to have that municipal perspective along the way, and also kind of tap into their expertise with 2D climate modeling. The board appointed two board of managers as project liaisons, Manager Hejmati and Manager Miller, which has been a great asset that we've had on board since kind of the onset of this work. We've contracted with Kimley Horan for $240,000, and shortly after kicked off the project in early 2022 with the team. The work itself was really broken out discretely around those two areas of risk. The first phase really being focused all on the data processing system, thinking about those spatial data sets and how to get them kind of model ready. And then the second phase of work was focused around learning more about ICPR and ICM and kind of understanding those differences. I'm not going to linger too long on kind of the phase one work and what that was able to provide for us, but I do want to kind of highlight a couple things for the board here because it has really been some foundational work that has allowed us to really advance some exciting watershed scale work. So when I mentioned earlier that we maybe had some anxieties around this work, I think the stormwater workflow was definitely kind of the biggest unknown, how we were going to take 30 plus unique data sets and kind of reasonably and effectively get them into one single model and be able to do that again. But we were really excited to kind of work collaboratively with the team, and in the end we were able to develop this kind of overarching framework, and we're able to see how it was going to work for the first time. A couple things I'll highlight because I know there's kind of a lot here is, you know, a big part of the framework is that we've utilized a standard database. We've capitalized on the work that Met Council has led to establish a database specifically designed for stormwater data sets. And so we've been able to actually build off the work from the pilot, and Alex and the Bolton and Mink team have just now completed getting the full watershed-wide comprehensive stormwater data set all in one standard. So we're really excited kind of about how this foundational work has set us up for watershed scale work. Second thing I'll highlight here is just that all the processes and kind of associated scripts that we've worked to develop through the pilot are model independent, meaning that we can benefit from all of this work and leverage these processes for future model builds, for future opportunity screening. And so we're excited that it's not necessarily tied to the specific model platform that we're choosing tonight. So then that brings us to kind of phase two of the project, again focused on learning about ICPR and ICM. And the goal was to bring forward and get to tonight, bringing forward a really strong and clear recommendation of which model would best serve us for climate. I think as we were nearing the end of the pilot model scope of work, we did have some kind of unanswered questions, some lingering reservations, and so we decided to kind of add in these additional steps with our advisory group and our academic model review to really feel confident in a recommendation of ICPR tonight. So to briefly walk you through kind of those three steps, our pilot model scope of work had multiple stages to it to look at different aspects of the model build, the model use, but a critical component and kind of the initial part of that phase was establishing our evaluation matrix. It looked to kind of call attention to multiple metrics that we wanted to track throughout the model build and throughout that work. The first half of the evaluation matrix is focused on the capabilities. So really, what are these models designed to do? The second half of the matrix, the functionality portion, is really about kind of the ease of use, the challenges we experienced. Were there any technical issues that might be kind of a non-starter in us selecting that model? This is a snapshot here of kind of the capabilities portion of the evaluation matrix. One thing I want to highlight is that we've broken it out into primary versus secondary uses. From the onset, we've really kept a clear kind of focus on this model serving us for climate. But we wanted to be mindful and acknowledge that this model could potentially serve additional uses and kind of could be maximized. So we've kept track of kind of some additional uses where we already have kind of existing tools in place to do some of those things. When we look at how kind of the results check out, the highlighted cells indicate that a model had a distinct advantage over the other. We can see that ICM's one advantage over ICPR is in its ability to model some water quality parameters. Again, this is deemed as kind of a secondary use for the model build because we have well-established water quality models in place already. Whereas ICPR, on the other hand, is a very strong advantage over ICM when it comes to its groundwater ability. It can realistically track water table changes over time and groundwater movement. And when we think about running long-term, kind of back-to-back consecutive wet or dry years, being able to have that realistic tracking of the groundwater table is going to be really valuable. From the beginning, we've said, we want to track functionality, but we will not avoid a model just because it's hard if it can kind of deliver the capabilities we need. And of course, that is how it shook out. ICPR, although better suited on a capability front, did prove to be more challenging to work with and build. I don't think we were surprised by these findings. ICM is owned by Autodesk, which is a multinational software company, so they've really put a lot of investment into that kind of user interface and the features available. But along with just tracking, where the challenges are occurring, we really wanted to evaluate if there was areas that we could mitigate for during the watershed-wide build. And one example of that is when it comes to model runtimes. We saw that ICPR was, on average, slower than ICM, which makes it a little more challenging for the modeler to work with. And, are there ways, is there hardware that the district can invest in where ICPR is able to kind of optimize its runtimes and really mitigate that as a big challenge or a hurdle for the modeler? So coming out of the pilot, we felt confident that ICPR was better suited on a capability front, largely due to those advantages with groundwater tracking, but we still had some open questions relating to the operation or the functional challenges and a couple technical issues that we daylit through the pilot model build. So we kind of opened up all our technical findings to a technical advisory group. This was really kind of a focus group style approach. We brought in a wide range of perspective, getting perspective from Hennepin County, my council, sharing that regional perspective, our municipal partner in Edina, drawing on the engineering community, who oftentimes are the ones interacting with the model on behalf of our municipal partners, and an academic from Virginia Tech who is kind of well-versed and experienced using ICPR for climate planning. Through this work, we've really asked them to kind of dive in, stress test our findings, and provide us kind of with their individual feedback and perspective, where we worked to kind of consolidate all of that into kind of some key findings within a synthesis document. Through that work, we did hear kind of recommendations and ideas that would be beneficial to try and maybe mitigate some of the issues that we experienced in the pilot. We worked with our academic advisor to actually have him get into one of our models and implement some of those suggested changes and really kind of better understand how alternative build approaches can really mitigate some of the challenges and issues that we saw in the pilot. So coming out of kind of those two additional steps, we were able to confirm that ICPR is better suited on a capability front to give us some of the answers we need for climate planning specifically. We were able to, see that yes, ICPR is going to be more challenging to work with and build out, but we think that looking into things like the improved hardware for the model and really finding a team for the watershed-wide build that has a depth of experience using ICPR will really help kind of navigate and mitigate some of those build challenges that we experienced. And lastly, we were able to confirm that kind of all the technical issues that we daylit through the pilot were not inherent to the software itself and could actually be mitigated from kind of some alternative build construction approaches. So to kind of summarize this, the lengthy and thorough process we've gone through over the last year and a half, we started with that pre-model screening to kind of narrow our field on model selection. We then went through our pilot model project where we built out these models in both a portion of the city of Edina and the city of Victoria. And along the way, we're able to kind of crack the code on how we are going to incorporate stormwater data sets into this model moving forward. We brought this work through an advisory group to kind of stress test those findings, provide feedback. We implemented that feedback. We kind of tested out these new ideas with our academic advisor from Virginia Tech. And then that brings us to tonight with our recommendation of ICPR, which just leaves the small task of building the model ahead of us. Speaking of kind of upcoming work and getting ready for the build, we are working on developing the RFP package for the watershed-wide build work. Right now anticipating bringing that forward in November, which would put us kind of kicking off the project in early 2024. We're looking into kind of that hardware purchase, and it's kind of up in the air right now whether that would require us coming back to the board or not, if it would be above kind of that cost threshold. So you might see that. And we're also in talks with our academic advisor at Virginia Tech. He seems really interested to kind of partner with us through the watershed-wide build, kind of in an advisor role. So we're kind of scoping that out right now and would hope to bring that contract forward through the board as well. So with that, I am seeking approval of Resolution 23061. Again, this is a kind of a twofold resolution where the board would be accepting the pilot model project summary report, officially closing out pilot model efforts and our scope of work with Kimley Horn, and also concurring with the selection of ICPR as our upcoming climate model platform.
Thank you, Ms. Cermak. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Manager Sando, is there a second? Manager Hijmati. Questions for Ms. Cermak? Manager Olson.
Quick question, legal, can we do this in one vote?
Yes, these two steps?
Yes.
for this resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Would you talk about runtime and what that really means?
Sure, President White. So oftentimes, we don't experience the challenge of the runtime as maybe the district, but where we see the impact of that is costs to build the model go up. To just get through one kind of model run to try to fix something or look at a result, it takes a lot longer. And so kind of to trying to debug or when we're in the calibration phase, for example, of a model and you're continuously trying to improve, those long run times can kind of be a burden and a challenge for the modeler. So trying to make those much more efficient, we'll be able to kind of iterate through model versions much quicker.
Can you put a number on that? Minutes and hours? What does that really mean?
It really can depend on whether we're running a 2-year climate projection or a 24-hour event.
Mm-hmm.
So we could be looking at a 24-minute simulation or I'm gonna throw this out, multiple hours simulation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so we want to try to get away from the multi-day runs. And when we've been kind of pricing out, we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars to get a good hardware that this could be optimized from. We're thinking kind of in the range of kind of 5 to 20, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions before we vote? All those in?
Just a
Manager
comment.
Hijmati?
Just a comment. I want to congratulate Kaylee and her team on very meticulous, careful, and very thorough work. Thank you.
Thank you. It's exciting milestone.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then the next resolution is yours as well, 23062.
All right, President White, Board of Managers, excited to be in front of you talking about something other than the 2D model. This will be a fun change of pace. Resolution 23062 is seeking approval to contract with the University of Wisconsin Stout to perform sediment core analysis in Wasserman Lake, which will allow us to evaluate the effectiveness of the recent alum treatments. I want to provide a quick background on the work that we've accomplished out near Wasserman Lake and within the lake itself. give a quick kind of lesson on internal loading 101 as a refresher, and then get into kind of the alum treatments we conducted in 2021 and 22 and how we've used sediment core data along the way to inform those treatments, and we'll wrap up with a recommendation. So we're very familiar with the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay geography. This map here highlights lakes where we have impairments, TMDLs in place. You can see Wasserman Lake highlighted there for you in the southern portion of the watershed. And in 2013, we conducted a diagnostic study, and part of that work was to develop nutrient budgets for all of these impaired systems. And really what a nutrient budget does is establish basically a diet for the lake. What do we need to kind of cut out from the loading in order for the lake to start meeting water quality standards? And we usually see reductions being needed both within the watershed and also within the lake itself. Results for Wasserman Lake and the sediment data back in 2013 really showed us that while we did need some reductions in the watershed, a big portion of Wasserman's load was coming internally from the sediment. Order of operations really does matter though. It's important to tackle those watershed projects first before you start looking at in-lake management. So we implemented a suite of kind of watershed projects. You can see those here highlighted in red on the map. We have the Lennar Wetland Restoration Project to the south of the lake, the Wasserman Preserve on the west, along with an alum application to the Wasserman West Pond, which drains into Wasserman Lake. With watershed kind of reductions accomplished through those projects, we were able to move on to internal projects. Carp are known to kind of stir up sediment and exacerbate those internal loading issues. Through our carp management program out in 6 Mile, we were able to get carp populations out in this lake kind of below that important ecological threshold as of 2018, and those populations have held steady and under that threshold since, which left us with kind of this final last step of providing the lake with an alum treatment. So I want to take a minute just to kind of refresh for the board why we pursue alum and kind of what internal loading is. So within the lake, there's 2 primary factors that are driving phosphorus release from sediment. The first is how much phosphorus is actually available within the sediment. This is oftentimes driven by historic heavy watershed loading. The second is, are there anoxic conditions present? Meaning, is there times where no oxygen is available along the sediment, which will allow that phosphorus to release? And the reason we pursue alum is it actually forms a really strong chemical bond with the phosphorus and kind of locks it in place and doesn't let it release under those anoxic condition periods. So we pursued grant funding for this work. We were awarded Clean Water Legacy funds for just under $285,000 for the alum treatment itself. And along the way, we've really relied on both water quality data and the sediment core data to inform how we should approach and design the application. The first application was applied in May of 2021. This map here kind of just shows where we've applied the alum. So we have kind of 2 separate zones in the deeper portion of the lake. After the first treatment, we followed up again with additional sediment cores to see how the lake sediment was responding to that treatment. And design recommendations based on that data told us to keep the dosing the same, keep the rates and the zones the same, with the idea that we would use remaining grant funds to apply extra in that shallower zone 1, and then with the recommendation of following up post-treatment to look at that sediment once again and evaluate if a third kind of maintenance treatment may be beneficial for the lake. So how is the lake looking? Couple things I want to highlight here on this graph is the work out in Wasserman has been cumulative. We've been building to this point, starting with our watershed work. You can see phosphorus concentrations in Wasserman starting to kind of trend downward as we implement. And really exciting in 2023 for the first time in our monitoring history, we've met state standards for phosphorus within Wasserman Lake. So very, very exciting. But we're right at that threshold, and we know there is variability year to year. So we plan to keep monitoring moving forward, keep up with our water quality sampling. We're tracking vegetation response very closely out there. And we'd like to do, following approval tonight, like to do another round of sediment cores. We would collect those this month, get those sent over to UW Stout, which is who we have previously relied on for the analysis work. Take a look at those results, combine that with what we're seeing in our water quality data, and evaluate whether that third maintenance treatment would be beneficial. So with that, I'm seeking approval of Resolution 23062, which would authorize us to contract with UW Stout to perform sediment core analysis with an not to exceed budget of $14,525.
Thank you.
Second?
Motion by Manager Miller, second by Manager Olson. Question, Manager Olson?
Yes. How many cores do you think it'll take?
I think we have, Brian might have to weigh in on this, 7 locations, and we usually do 3 at each spot just to get an average.
Okay, so then how do we deliver that to Stout? Do we just drive over?
Delicately,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
we have them in buckets that have slots and strap them in the car and we drive them.
Okay, so we do the driving?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do.
I seem to recall from a previous time that Stout is really the only one who can do that length of core.
Yeah, President White, it does seem that there is not a lot of people regionally that analyze the core, at least in this way. I know Stantec kind of relies on UW Stout for this work as well, so.
Did you have more questions?
No.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Cermak? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I could tell by that photograph you enjoy that work.
It's fun.
23063, we have Ms. Schaufler and Mr. Wolf.
Sorry, give me just a moment.
The other reports have been flawless, so
No pressure, right? Is there a way to get to Twin Lakes? I've never gone to see Twin Lakes.
Yeah, President White, I'm trying to think of the road that runs north along it.
So along the north side, I can find
Yeah,
it.
there's you can see it well, and there's might even be like some city property, I think, kind of right in the middle.
Thank
It's
you.
very small.
I won't go immediately, but I might go someday. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Tonight we have item 11.3, approval of 100% design plans for the 2023-2024 Stormwater Pond dredging project and authorization to solicit bids. So some background on the project. On July 6th, the board authorized the release of RFP for engineering and design. And then on the August 10th meeting, the board authorized contract with Stantec for engineering and design of Twin Lakes Park and the Comus Amelia Ponds region. And since that date, they've been working on the final design that we're presenting this evening. So this slide should start to look a little bit familiar. This is a recap of our stormwater pond dredging process. The two questions surrounding pond dredging are, how much sediment has accumulated, and how has that reduced the pond's effectiveness? So when 50% of the pond's original design volume has been filled with sediment, it requires maintenance. Based on these two questions, this year we have 2 ponds requiring maintenance. Twin Lakes Park Pond and Nokomis Amelia Pond, located here by the red dots, both are scheduled for maintenance this winter. These projects represent a reinvestment in the original Chain of Lakes project completed in the 1990s and early 2000s. Zooming in from the watershed map, Here's a map of the Twin Lakes Park Pond original as-built plans from 1996. Now we have the 2021 Stantec Pond Sediment Survey and the most recent 2023 sediment survey showing the accumulation of sediment in the recent years. The darker the color indicates more accumulated sediment in that area of the pond, the darkest red indicating greater than 3.5 feet of accumulation. The plans call for the removal of 3,030 cubic yards of sediment. For reference, that's about 303 quad-axle dump trucks. That's all sediment that would have made its way into Twin Lake and ultimately Cedar Lake. So this is now affecting the ability of the pond to absorb more sediment. Now we'll be removing this accumulated sediment to restore this pond to its original design intent, kind of like emptying a vacuum cleaner bag when it's full. Now, looking at the image on the right, the dark crosshatched area indicates the access path to the pond from West 26th Street to the south. You can see the contour lines on the final plans on the right indicating the grading of the pond to the design elevation at the bottom. So here we have a similar slide for the Amelia Pond. First, on the left is the original as-built from 2000, and then we can see how the pond has filled over the years since its last dredging in 2011 to the current survey taken this year. At Amelia Pond, we'll be removing 6,740 cubic yards of sediment that would have been deposited into Lake Nokomis, which would be approximately 675 dump trucks. This pond has 3 cells, and you can see on the right, with berms separating them that can be seen by the contour lines. This requires 3 points of access, 2 of which will be from Lake Nokomis Parkway to the south, and then a route along the edge of the pond will access the north cell to avoid crossing a shallow utility line on the north side of the pond. Contour lines show grading and the floor of the designed pond height. So district staff have reviewed the pond dredging plans with staff from both respective cities, and the park board have been on site for walkthroughs with staff at both sites to review access, vegetation, trails, and haul routes. So tentative schedule from now until October 20th would be the development of the bid documents and support, with the anticipation of final specifications open for bidding on the 20th of October. We'd like to close the bidding on November 14th. And then on the November 29th meeting, we would bring to the board the construction contract and our district permit for board approval, with construction to commence from December 1st to February 29th. Now, therefore, staff requests the approval for the final design plans for the 2023-2024 stormwater pond maintenance and authorization of the district administrator to solicit bids for construction maintenance of Twin Lakes Park Pond and Nokomis Amelia Pond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell seconds. Any questions?
Yeah.
Manager Miller?
Yes.
Is this local water, or is this coming from Richfield also?
Manager Miller, President White. The Nokomis ponds, that Amelia Pond, I think that's all local because the channel that drains into Lake Nokomis from the south, so you can see on the map there, just to the right of the pond, there's a channel, that's what drains in from
Okay.
Richfield.
And the second question is, if we're getting that much out of that one section of the neighborhood that drains into the lake, what does the rest of the lake look like that is got dozens of drainage from the neighborhood? Or have we ever looked at whether there be any science to support dredging the lake, at least from the sediment that comes in from the regular storm sewers? How long before this turns into a sandbox?
Yeah, Manager Miller, President White. So this is one of 3 stormwater ponds we have around Lake Nokomis. To the north of what you see here and to the east, there's 2 other stormwater ponds. So when the district implemented this project, which included installing Nokomis Weir and then these 3 stormwater ponds, there was a robust analysis done at that time to determine where was there actually land and feasibility to install these stormwater ponds. More recently, I know the park board and the city have done some work around Lake Nokomis and have been evaluating whether those outfalls and there's opportunities for improvement. And then I think as part of the broader Lake Nokomis master plan, they're actively reviewing that, and I think the work that Mike's team's doing, looking more comprehensively across Minneapolis, these are things that will get filtered through that, but I can look to Chris or.
Mr. Mann?
Manager Miller, managers, yeah, it's something that they did, when they looked at Nokomis, they looked at the biggest bank in the buck, and that's how we kind of targeted these ponds. And now as they're going with some of the smaller watersheds that drain into Nokomis, working with the city and the park board to identify how they can address some of that sediment concerns of coming in from the neighborhoods. And as they've come along, they're trying to target the specific project, working with those partners along the way. So we don't necessarily know what's in Lake Nokomis, but we know it's something we want to address with some of these
Okay.
locals.
And I'll say, like, you know, the Richfield water is being treated through the Taft Legion projects as well, so you're kind of hitting Lake Nokomis from all the different kind of major drainage areas.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Manager Wilson.
Okay, 675 dump trucks.
Dump trucks.
And that's the small ones. The process of taking out that sediment, is that a wintertime job or a summertime job?
Yep, it's winter,
Do we pull out the water in the ponds?
so the ponds are dewatered, yep, through DNR, we got a DNR dewatering permit, the water's pulled out of the pond. They kind of, we hope that it's frozen.
Yep.
So they take then they take the ice and they actually pile that in the center, kind of work around it, while they dredge out.
Okay, so
They're
we're not,
actively dewatering.
we're not spending 300 of those trucks hauling water.
No.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Manager Hitchmott?
Is the stuff that you're going to be dredging, is it clean or is it contaminated?
So I should have mentioned that. We did do a sediment analysis on this, and both of the ponds do have contaminated sediment, so it will need to be landfilled, unfortunately.
Okay.
That was my question. Where do we take this into?
So I know there's two landfills that will accept this type of fill, and I don't remember the cities that they're in.
Yeah, one's in Burnsville and then one's in Elk River, so it's up to the contractor.
So, so they have a route, and so there's no need to like notify neighbors if there's all of a sudden there's 600 some trucks going through the neighborhood, but we don't all of a sudden think it's our problem.
Yeah, Manager Maxwell, managers, so the cities, through the city permit approval process, we walk through the agreed access route and then also the hauling route for stuff like this. So that all gets approved and reviewed by the city. And then as part of our project communication to the neighborhood residents, we'll send out postcards, and there'll be a website on our, sorry, a webpage on our website that will let people know.
We're trying to be proactive,
Yeah.
so they know it was coming and happens.
Yep.
Otherwise, if it's to a residential area, and that many trucks, all of a sudden, if they ever come back with a street project, they'll still say it was our fault because we put 600 some trucks through there, then we should be paying for it instead of them homeowners, so.
Goes right down Cedar Avenue to 62.
Yeah, so both of these
The president
ponds,
probably.
yeah, have been dredged in the last decade, so there's been some good precedent that can be reapplied.
Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Mr. Haven, we'll go to item 12.1. And Mr. Lindgren.
Good evening.
Welcome.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair White, managers. We are before you this evening to provide a redevelopment planning update for the Board of Managers in advance of the final extension for the purchase and sale agreement and its expiration date on November 5th of 2023. Just want to remind the board of the site orientation, and I have a graphic a little later that hopefully will delineate the exact buildings and parcels that are in question. But just for a reminder, the buildings upon the site are named A through E, and they go from north to south, and then D and E are the buildings that are adjacent to the future stormwater facility. And of course, then the site infrastructure and the cascade is all considered part of the same takedown as the next tranche of land. So that's the right-of-way and stormwater components. We did sell the first parcel to Aladdis in June or July was the closing of 2022. That was the 1.34 acres, and it included $1 million in escrow that's non-refundable to be applied to the next phase of purchase as we move towards that development. And this is indicating the remainder of the site that we're now in active negotiation around which sites or which portions of this become phase 1B and phase 2 as described in the purchase sale agreement. Just a little bit of background on the feasibility period as described in the PSA. That's really what dictates the present timeline and what we're moving through. After 1 year from execution, they had the opportunity to extend twice, and each of those occurred in 90-day increments for $25,000 per extension. The first extension occurring in August, and the second occurring, the expiration of the first in August, meaning the second needed to be exercised before August 7th, which Aladdis did in shortly before August 7th, right after we had delivered our counter proposal or our terms for a second amendment for additional extensions to Aladdis. And so with that, this evening we wanted to revisit the conversations around those proposed terms and what additional information we've received from Aladdis as well as the city. And so as it relates to negotiation of the potential sale of the property, we will ask legal counsel to lead us into closed session so the board can speak openly on that matter.
Thank you.
Madam President, at this time, we'd recommend that the board go into closed session for the purpose of considering terms to negotiate concerning the sale of 325 Blake Road in Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Olson, move. Miller, second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in closed session. Motion to go into open session.
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second for Manager Maxwell? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are in open session once again, and it's just in time for the administrator's report.
Thank you, President White.
Oh, I forgot item 13.
Oh, darn
I'm
it.
sorry.
Too late.
Board inquiries, issues, and ideas. Anything we should add? Okay, no. All right, go ahead.
I think we should go into.
Ready to go?
It is
Okay.
behind you now.
Yeah, President White, managers, the administrator's report for tonight. We've gotten some more rain since the last time I gave a report, and I'm sure Becky touched on. It sounds like it rained quite a bit while I was gone, but right now we're still sitting 4.3 inches below normal for the year, so we've received around 23 inches. We're, as a watershed, in a severe drought, which currently covers 40% of the state. But when you zoom out and you look at the entire state, almost 100% of the state is in some form of drought designation. We have, like I mentioned, received a little bit of water that's given water levels a very small boost. Fairly perceptible, again, if you zoom out and just look at where Lake Minnetonka sits, it's at 927.9 feet, 17 inches below ordinary high, 7.5 inches below runout elevation, so the dam remains closed. We've got a little bit of flow down at Hiawatha Avenue in the creek, around 10 CFS, and we're supposed to get another 2 to 3 inches over the next 2 days. So the rain's been good probably for the garden. I don't think we've seen much water level response. Couple relational touch points here coming up. We'll be giving our annual presentation to the Carver County Commissioners next Tuesday, October 17th. Manager Olson, President White will be joining me and project planning staff, so we will report back on that. President White mentioned the liaisons and the Minneapolis partnership, just to kind of keep the pulse of information flowing. We are continuing to make really good progress building the Minneapolis partnership with the city of Minneapolis, the park board, the district, policymakers, and staff. We just keep having continuous touch points. We're working with staff on a draft cooperative agreement that would frame concrete action around shared investment from all three partners in 3 pilot projects located along Minnehaha Creek, which we estimate could help delist Lake Hiawatha once implemented. As well, long-term, in sort of a long-range planning focus mode, I'm developing a cohesive water management strategy between the 3 partners so that we've got clear roles around things like flooding and water quality. The agreement outlines right now a governance structure that would help staff leadership, staff, and policymakers stay in sync on an annual rhythm long-term so that we can avoid in the future issues like we ran into with the Nokomis surface and groundwater issues where we're all in lockstep dealing with local issues as well as regional issues. And part of that is a policy steering committee, which Sherry mentioned. It sounds like Manager Hedgemati and Manager Miller will be our designates for that with Sherry as an alternate. We're looking to schedule a kickoff, review the broad goals, look at the agreement, the pilot projects, the funding, and then I think importantly set expectations for the whole governance framework ahead in the coming year in 2024. We anticipate Councilmember Koski will be leading that. The city has asked for essentially direct support from the district staff to step into a lead role as the convener and manager of the partnership. We'll be drawing on Lewis, I think, to help us with the actual steering committee meetings. And then Councilmember Koski on the city side would be joined with a delegate from the mayor's office. That'll, if it's not the mayor, it'll likely be a senior policy aide or Director Kelleher, the Director of Public Works, who reports directly to the mayor. So we thought, I think today we had a meeting set for November 13th, but it turns out the canvassing board, which is the city council, needs to meet that day to certify election results. So we're kind of get back into the scheduling mode. So we're going to be sending out a project partnership update email to all the policymakers, all the staff tomorrow with a scheduling poll. I think we'd anticipate getting everybody together at the end of November. Even though we've got a little bit of push there, I think we're optimistic that we'll get the steering committee done. We'll advance the cooperative agreement with this project focus and funding by the end of the year. And then that would position us still in first quarter of next year to actually start feasibility work with the city. So I'm really excited about that. And then last but not least, President White and I are making annual rounds with Hennepin County Commissioners. So far, we've secured meetings with Commissioner Anderson, Conley, which I think Manager Hedgemati is going to join us on. Commissioner Conley's shown, I think, express interest in what we're doing in Minneapolis in the past and asked Arun to join us. Commissioner Lundy and Gotel. Still waiting to hear back from Commissioner Green and Chair Fernando, and obviously we're missing District 6 Commissioner Latondras, who's moved on. Sherry informed me just this week when I got back that that District 6 seat is likely to be filled in May, I think you said, as part of the special election.
April 30th primary, May 14th election.
When's the election?
April 30th is the primary, they push it back, and May 14th is the special election. That's a ways.
Yeah. So, and just a kind of courtesy reminder there, we do have two board managers up for reappointment as part of our annual cycle in Hennepin County. We've got President White and Steve, Manager Sando. I think Lewis has advised in the past, based on the Supreme Court interpretation, that nominations from local communities are advised. So we can talk offline if either of you have questions or need help with that. But we'll be making the rounds with Hennepin County Commissioners, presenting with Carver County, and then hopefully advancing the Minneapolis partnership all in the next month or so.
Do we have a form that we can hand to each manager and say, there's your nomination sheet with the required data?
We do have template resolutions, having seen Manager Miller and Loftus go through that last cycle, that was helped draft, and so those are templated out. And yeah, we know the process. I think County Clerk reached out recently. They always like to understand the incumbents and cycles and make sure all that information is correct. And I think County Clerk should have probably already reached out to President White and Manager Sando, just letting you know when the application period starts, which I believe is November.
I think it's the 12th, I can't remember.
November 12th, and then it closes, I think last year it closed December 31st. They run it right to the end of the year, and then they get a month or so where they kind of process those administratively before the board takes them up in February and March.
Great, thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Manager Hedgemati, sorry.
I hope that the prospects for Councilmember Koski getting re-elected are good.
That's what I've heard. Others might have a firmer read. I'm not tracking the race too closely. I do think that she's one of the council members that is running with opposition, but talking to her policy, I think that they're running a strong ground game, and she's done well in office, and I think that they're fairly confident, but others might have a stronger sense.
Is anyone running? No one's running against her?
Yeah, she has opposition.
She has some opposition?
Mhm.
She's gonna win.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Whisker.
Thank you.
Anything else we should, meeting adjourned.